It started subtly. My husband, Jake, had always been charming, friendly, even flirty, but he knew the lines not to cross. Or so I believed. My sister Lena had recently moved back to our city after a breakup, and I offered her our guest room until she got back on her feet. I was just trying to help. Family helps family. But something shifted. Jake started acting odd. He'd linger longer in the living room when Lena was around. Their jokes became inside jokes. I'd walk into a room and they'd suddenly go quiet, or change the subject. I chalked it up to paranoia. How could I suspect them? The two people I loved the most. Until I found the text. It wasn't even graphic. It was casual. Miss you already. Same time tomorrow? Sent from my husband. To my sister. My hands shook. My heart didn't race, it dropped. That kind of cold, heavy stillness when you know your world is about to split in two. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I watched. I started to notice everything. The subtle glances. The convenient errands they ran together. How Lena started wearing makeup around the house. How Jake would be extra affectionate with me, too affectionate. Guilt, wearing a mask of love. One night, I pretended to go out with a friend. I waited around the corner, then came back home after 10 minutes. The house was too quiet. I walked in and caught them in the act. Not just physically, but emotionally entwined, laughing like lovers who had no care in the world. Until they saw me. The look on both their faces was a twisted mix of shame and fear. Jake stammered. Lena cried. But I didn't scream. I just left. It felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of my life. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the emotional intimacy they shared. The way she, my own sister, confided in him instead of me. The way he leaned on her during times I thought we were reconnecting. It wasn't just sex, it was a full-blown emotional betrayal. And that cuts deeper. I cut them both off. Moved out. I filed for divorce. My family is still fractured. My parents couldn't even take a side. Some said Lena made a mistake. Others said Jake took advantage. I stopped caring what anyone thought. The ultimate betrayal is not always from strangers or distant acquaintances. It often comes from those we hold closest. In this story, the betrayal hits twice as hard because it's committed not by one person, but two, a husband and a sister. These are the two individuals a woman might feel safest with, her romantic partner and her lifelong confidant. When infidelity happens in that dynamic, it shatters more than just trust. It tears apart the foundation of one's identity, family, and emotional core. The woman at the center of this story believed she had two solid pillars in her life: her husband, who had been her companion, and her sister, who had grown up with her through everything. The betrayal from both was a gut punch that took away not just love, but a sense of belonging. The emotional depth of betrayal is intensified by the history shared between the woman and her sister. This wasn't just a sibling. They had a bond that spanned decades: childhood sleepovers, shared secrets, mutual support through breakups, losses, and family crises. There's an unspoken code between siblings, especially sisters, about loyalty and protection. That sense of emotional safety is rooted so deep that when it's broken, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes one's sense of reality. The woman in this situation didn't just lose a husband, she lost the sister she leaned on, trusted, and probably even loved unconditionally. The realization that her sister crossed such a line knowingly added a layer of devastation no amount of time could prepare her for. The betrayal by the husband, while painful, came from someone she didn't grow up with. His infidelity was a violation of vows and promises made. Yes, but it was a betrayal rooted in romantic expectations. The sister's betrayal, on the other hand, was rooted in blood, in childhood bonds, and in shared life experiences. That kind of hurt feels primal. It makes a person question everything past memories, conversations, hugs, laughs. Were they all fake? Or did something truly shift along the way that broke her sister's moral compass so completely? Complicating the emotional terrain even further is the element of trust being played like a game between them. For the affair to occur under the same roof, for the sister to move into the woman's home and sleep with her husband while pretending to be a support system, it's not just hurtful, it's deeply manipulative. It signals a betrayal that was not just impulsive, but sustained and emotionally calculated. The woman welcomed her sister into her space, believing she was helping her through a rough time. In return, she was betrayed in the most intimate and cruel way possible. Every look, every conversation between them while the affair was going on feels, in retrospect, like a lie. And that emotional gaslighting, the unspoken deceit, wrapped in familiar faces, leaves behind scars that last a lifetime. There is also the added pain of being left in the dark while others possibly knew or suspected something was going on. The betrayal is compounded by the silence, by the idea that both the husband and the sister believed she was naive or unaware enough to never catch on. That kind of arrogance and disrespect only adds salt to the wound. It's not just what they did, but the fact that they believed she didn't deserve honesty, didn't deserve truth. It's a deep and unforgivable form of emotional abandonment, one that forces a woman to reevaluate not just the two people who wronged her, but herself. How did she not see it coming? How could she trust so blindly? These aren't just questions of grief, they're questions of identity. Ultimately, the betrayal committed by both the husband and the sister represents the deepest form of emotional violence. It's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't just break, it reshapes. After something like this, trust is never the same. Love is never the same. And family, once a safe place, becomes a source of trauma. This keynote, at its core, is about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect your heart become the ones who destroy it. Long before the truth of the affair came out, there were signs, subtle, fleeting, easily dismissed, but present nonetheless. Emotional shifts, behavioral changes, and a gnawing sense of something being off began to surface, hinting at a deeper betrayal. The woman began to notice that her husband, Jake, no longer looked at her the same way. His eyes would glaze over during conversations. He started missing the small things, forgetting to ask about her day, skipping their usual evening routine, or giving short, distracted answers when she tried to connect. There wasn't a single moment she could pinpoint as the start of his detachment, but rather a gradual erosion of the emotional closeness they once shared. What made it confusing was how good he was at acting normal in front of others, how well he kept up the facade of a loving partner until the cracks began to show behind closed doors. Even more confusing was the emotional energy he suddenly had around her sister Lena. He seemed livelier when she was in the room, his jokes more frequent, his smiles more genuine. It wasn't just in her head. The shift was there. The way Jake would volunteer to help Lena with errands, how he'd laugh too long at her jokes, or stand just a little too close when talking to her. The woman told herself she was being paranoid, overthinking harmless family interaction. After all, they were family now. But intuition has a way of whispering truths long before facts can catch up. The emotional signals weren't loud, but they were steady. They hummed in the background like a warning siren you don't want to believe is real. She also noticed how Lena started to change in subtle ways after moving in. She began dressing differently around the house, more makeup, tighter clothes, even lingering under a robe when she thought no one was looking. At first, the woman chalked it up to her sister, trying to boost her confidence after a bad breakup. But things didn't quite add up. There were conversations that paused when she entered the room, laughter that died down too quickly. And then came the emotional absence. Her sister, who used to tell her everything, had suddenly gone quiet. She wasn't sharing her usual drama or confiding in her. She was always texting, her phone glued to her hand, with a smile that felt secretive instead of carefree. The emotional cues were subtle, but stacked like bricks over time. One small sign might have been easy to brush off, but the growing pile of inconsistencies, awkward moments, and emotional shifts became too hard to ignore. And yet, the woman tried. She told herself families go through weird phases. She believed that being suspicious of her own sister was a reflection of her insecurity, not actual betrayal. She gaslighted herself before anyone else had the chance to. That's often the cruelty of emotional betrayal. It isn't always loud or explosive. Sometimes, it's quiet. A change in energy, a lack of presence, a coldness that arrives slowly but settles deep into your bones. Eventually, emotional distance gave way to physical clues, the suspicious text, the secretive behavior, the change in tone between her sister and her husband. But before the hard evidence, it was the emotional truth that echoed the loudest. She felt the betrayal long before she saw it. The absence of connection, the breakdown of intimacy, and the emotional transfer from wife to sister, those things don't hide well. They may be veiled at first, but they speak through vibes, through silence, through moments that don't sit right in the gut. What began as emotional negligence grew into a devastating realization that the two people she trusted were emotionally attaching to each other in the space meant for her. That's the ache that started it all. What began as subtle boundary crossing between a husband and a sister gradually spiraled into a dangerous and complex web of lies and secrecy. At first, it was small things, harmless texts, light teasing, shared glances that lingered just a second too long. The woman didn't think much of it. She trusted them. Why wouldn't she? Her sister had always been in her corner, and her husband had vowed to love her forever. But behind those seemingly innocent interactions, something darker was growing, an emotional connection that neither of them had any right to foster. As the affair progressed, it took root in secrecy. They didn't just share moments, they started creating a hidden world within the very walls of her home. Every laugh they shared, every casual touch, every conversation that excluded her, became bricks in the house of betrayal they were quietly building together. They thought they were clever. They masked their betrayal under the guise of family closeness. If anyone questioned their bond, it could easily be dismissed. We're family, that's all. But there's a difference between love, rooted in loyalty and affection, and the kind that simmers with tension and hidden desire. The woman began to notice they spoke in coded language, had inside jokes that she didn't understand, and began finishing each other's sentences. It was subtle manipulation, emotional deceit, wrapped in normalcy. The way her husband would suddenly leave the room when she entered, or the way her sister would overcompensate with affection, as if trying to cover up the guilt bleeding through her smile. All of it became part of the growing web, a structure held together by lies that were rehearsed, repeated, and refined. Maintaining the secret became a performance, and both Jake and Lena became masters at it. They made sure never to be alone in obvious ways, never to send messages that could be easily discovered, and never to let their guilt show unless they were certain the woman wasn't looking. But the strain of keeping the affair hidden began to leak out in subtle emotional inconsistencies. Her husband, once a predictable and dependable presence, started changing his routines. He suddenly worked late more often, stayed glued to his phone, and became defensive when asked simple questions. Her sister, too, began creating emotional distance, becoming more private, spending more time in her room, and volunteering less information about her day. Every lie needed another lie to support it, and soon they were both drowning in a sea of half-truths, omissions, and carefully curated moments. What made the situation even more cruel was the fact that both of them made conscious decisions to deceive her. This wasn't a single, regrettable moment of weakness. It was an ongoing, willful act of betrayal. Each time they looked her in the eye and pretended everything was fine, They were choosing to keep their secret alive. Every hug, every dinner, every shared family memory became tainted by the reality that they were lying with every breath. And with each passing day, they got better at it, until they started to believe they would never be caught. Their arrogance grew. They mistook her love and trust for blindness. They assumed her silence meant she didn't know. But the truth was always circling just beneath the surface, waiting to rise. What had started as flirtation escalated into full emotional and physical infidelity, and to sustain it, they created a fragile world of deception. But lies are heavy, and secrets have a way of unraveling. No matter how skillfully woven, webs built on betrayal can only hold for so long before they collapse. And when they do, they don't just break hearts, they destroy trust in its purest form. The emotional intimacy, the manipulation, the shamelessness, it all became a cruel game they played together, all while pretending to be the two people she could count on most. The web of lies wasn't just a product of their guilt, it was a mirror of their cowardice.